But let me tell you where I am, because and I don't mean to say that I knew what sustains me before, but I might say I always had a purpose. I mean, always had a purpose. I always questioned anyway and found something, whether it was just trying to grow up to be old enough to leave home, or to become a dancer in New York in the 50s, or, getting to Asia, whatever that is, whatever that was. Certainly being a single mother, I had no question what sustains me. I didn't have any time to think about it. I just had to work my butt off, take care of the children, earn enough money, feed them, da, 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 da. And now I'm 77 years old, or 76 years old, depending on who's counting. Meaning in Asia, they give you credit for the first year of your life in utero.
Oh.
So I'm 77 in Asia, and I'm only 76 here. I'm doing a lot of the prenatal work. I believe we deserve the credit for all that work we do. So I'm 77 years old, and 10 years ago, actually, I moved up to Seattle from the Bay Area, where I had been for many, many years, and had, taught in 3 different graduate schools and had clients and everything, as well as traveling a lot. I left that because I moved to Seattle because my second child, my son, was going to have a grandchild. I mean, was going to have a child, and it would be my grandchild. So I moved up to Seattle. Things did not work well because my granddaughter was injured at birth, which is my field, but I wasn't allowed to step into that field. And things were so awkward with my daughter-in-law that I moved back to California. And with the birth of the second child, I moved back up here again. So I'm living in Seattle, which I don't like. It's cold, gloomy. I have a small practice. When people find me, I think people in California, I left so quickly, people in California, I think they think I'm dead. And up here, very few people know I'm here, but on a few websites like SE, people find me, and I do have clients. But I moved up here for the second time to, what do I say, to counteract my daughter-in-law, who feeds my grandchildren as much sugar as she can stuff in them. And I have, in this house, I have almost a half of an acre, and I grow vegetables, and I do all sorts of things, trying to let the children know that there's something else, that there's nature and there's the world, and not just television and video games and that stuff. So strangely enough, I've been thinking a lot. So what sustains me, since you bring up, and it's such a nice way to put it, imminently, what sustains me is contact with my grandchildren, which I don't have often. What else sustains me is growing vegetables and fruit, and the chickens I have. Although I have better conversations with my 6 chickens than I've had with many adults here in Seattle.
And the growing vegetables and chickens, is it something that you used to have in Northern California?
As soon as I had a child, as soon as I had a house where I could live, because I was living in Big Sur and teaching at Esalen a lot. But when I moved into Marin County and had property, I started growing vegetables because I wanted to feed my children as well as I could. So I've been doing that, for a long time.
But is that something that also was in your background growing up, or is it so? It was a shift that you, it's something that you acquired as an adult.
Something that I jumped into and still don't know much about. But I trust nature a lot. So rather than do something, I just let nature take over. I happen to have an arugula forest, but a lot of other things just don't work so well. but it's all me as an adult. I was a city girl. I lived in New York City as soon as I got away from home. And then San Francisco, no place for garden. So all of my young life was sort of running away in a way, away from family, away from various things. And I stopped and found sustenance for the first time, other than outward direction, um, was going to Japan and living in Japan in 1965. I had always felt I was born in the wrong country. I knew I was born in the wrong family. Um, and when I was 6 and 7 years old, I used to go to sleep holding my eyes back, hoping they would slant while I would sleep. And I wanted long black hair, just long, straight black hair. And I wanted to grow up and marry the Dalai Lama. Nobody knew who the Dalai Lama was. It was during the time of the war, so they were dirty Japs, most of those Asians. How in the world would I get that? I got it. And going to Japan when I was, how old was I? 26, was like, oh, I have been in the wrong country. This is really, I felt at home for the first time. And yeah, I felt at home for the first time. I felt more comfortable wearing Japanese clothing than I did Western clothing, which never seemed to fit me because I was either too small or something. And after dancing and studying everything that moved in Japan for a year, I entered a Buddhist monastery to go to the other end, maybe not move so much, but sit still. And when the Zen master asked me what I had done in the United States, I had told him that I had been a dancer, and he looked at me and he smiled and he said, now you will learn the highest form of dance, movementless dance. I thought, yeah, I don't know. But anyway, a year and a half there, I don't know how or what, quite frankly, but things happen, and that still sustains me in a way. I still feel more at home and warm inside me when I think of that time, as difficult as it was. I was the only woman in a monastery with 30 men traditionally being taught. So it was very, very challenging. And it was a challenge, and it sustained me a lot. And I only left because I knew I wanted to have children. I wanted to have a family. And I thought that, and I wanted to test what my time in the monastery, what it had done for me, or could I take what I learned and bring it into the marketplace, so to speak. It's easy to sit on a mountaintop and be supported and do whatever you need to do, but how easy is it, or is it possible when you're back with the traffic and the noise and everything? So I came back.
So I want to maybe just like there give you a sense of an arc that I'm getting so far, is that sense of a very powerful force to say that what sustains me is I want to grow away from this place, which is not me. And that, leads you to New York, to dance, to Japan, and to having a strong sense of, this is more like me. And then to Zen, and then, in a way, after having the arc going that way, of saying, and now I want to bring this back to where I come from, and see what it's like to have this, in the environment where I come from, in a broad sense.
Yeah, and how can I be comfortable in that environment where I was plopped by whatever? Yeah, something else.
Plopped.
Yeah, plopped. That's what it felt like. I was plopped.
So, do you want to say more about that?
Actually, the funny thing is that I have no sense of direction. To this day, I have no sense of direction. I have gotten lost on my own property up in Canada, which is not easy to do. But when people used to comment on that for years, I would say, "Oh, that's how I was born. It was just a birth trauma. I got lost being born, and I knew nothing about what I was talking about." Many years later, as I've studied all of that work and experientially studied it and went back over and over and over to my own birth, I did get lost. I really did. I mean, so lost and so confused. And I died during my birth. It took a lot of research to find that out. But that's another big part of it. And the growing away, in a way, or growing back. Eventually, with all the work I did, the Reichian work and and studying with Lowen and all of these things, it really didn't come together until I got the perinatal picture.
So that sense that
Yeah.
that the determining thing was that being lost, and actually being near death or being
Mm-hmm.
dead and
Yeah.
back.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to say, when I listen to the interviews you do, I love the way you listen. I marvel at the way you listen, and you re-verbalize, or you put in different words, reflect back to the person. It's like, whoa. I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful talent. I just want to compliment you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and as you're talking, something else comes up for
Mm-hmm.
me that is really big in my, it's always been big in my life and is bigger now for a strange reason, but it's my connection to the Holocaust and being Jewish. So all of my life, as I grew up, is however young I was when I started it. I think it was after this, but I don't remember when. The question was, why am I here? Why am I not there? How come I'm not scrubbing myself with a cake of concrete? Thinking it was soap. And all along, as I grew older, it was, would I sleep with a Nazi to save my life? I would question myself all along the way. And it wasn't guilt. It was just such an unusual connection to that. And I have, by the way, read probably 100 memoirs of the Holocaust, still do. And at least once, I mean, I've been to a couple of concentration camps when I was in Europe, and I could feel my relatives, my ancestors in one of them. But one time, while I was trading a craniosacral session with a colleague of mine, we were both studying with Franklin Sills, and it was my turn to be lying on my bed in Mill Valley talking to him. I had with his hands on my head, I had two past life experiences, and I'd done research on that in the past, more knowingly, because I really wanted to know, why did I feel this way? Why was I always so tired? Why this? And I got some good questions. Some of those sessions, most of them I did always by myself, with a little help of a little substance sometimes. But this was totally, totally spontaneous. Nothing except this man who I didn't know very well, his hands on my head, and I went back immediately to being in a concentration camp. And I mean, it was so clear. It was so clear. I could explain the whole thing to him. And what I learned was, other than the whole thing, I was standing on the edge I was 17 years old. I was standing on the edge of the pit with lots of bodies in there, and there was a Gestapo man right over there. And I'm lying there talking to this guy and telling him, explaining the whole thing. And then I say, oh my God, I've been shot. And I had a pain in my side like I've never had before or since. I was actually shot. And then it was a great big boot that kicked me into the pit.
Mm.
I have always had lower back pains.
Mm.
I can even now, as I tell you, and this is at least maybe 10, 15 years since that time happened, I can feel the movement of the bodies underneath me who were not dead yet, who were trying to get up for air. It was just an incredible experience. And what surprised me most of all, I mean, I was terrified and I was also furious. I was so angry. And that I had never gotten before. I know how terrified, the situation was for so many people, but being so angry.
Mm.
And after that, I spoke to Peter Levine, I spoke to Brian Weiss about it, and they all went, yeah, parallel lives, no problem. Of course it's possible. Because I was born in 1939, how could I be there and still in Rochester, New York, or Detroit, Michigan, or something? But such a connection to death.
So let's go back to the image itself, which is a very powerful, because when we see a connection to death, it could be something abstract, but at that moment, there was that very vivid sense of you. You're standing in front. You're 17. You're standing in front of the pit. There's all these people who are not quite dead, but have been thrown there. You have the Gestapo guy just right next to you. We're not that far.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, and then you are experiencing the kick that propels you from where you are standing into the pit.
First the
And mhm,
first the gunshot.
the gunshot, and the gunshot, and then you notice how you're wounded.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the kick, and the kick is something that you still can find the sensation of.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're thrown into this place of people, and it's not just even dead as a curtain. One moment you're alive, one moment you're dead,
Mm-hmm.
but you're seeing it in this, and you're also in the midst of people who are where the stage of dying is prolonged. They're not quite dead into the pit. They're in the world of the dead in the pit, but they're still not quite dead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's an intensity to the experience of death,
Mm-hmm.
that the phrase about just connected to death doesn't even begin to,
Yeah.
to describe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The thing that kept, most people when they got shot, they fell into the pit.
Mm-hmm.
But what kept me standing was my anger,
Yeah, yeah,
my
yeah,
fury.
yeah, yeah. And
And so,
so you connected to the anger and what keeps you standing. So in that sense, this is the moment of, maybe what sustains me is my anger in that
exactly.
experience. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. And I
yeah.
have to admit that I am an angry person. Ask my children. Yeah. So I'm going, oh my gosh, there is a connection.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a connection. And there's also a connection with death because my mother died when I was 3.
Mm-hmm.
So all along, and then all of the people, in Europe and everything. So anger, death, well, I don't know if death sustains me, but my anger sustains me a lot.
Yeah.
I was told by someone who was a psychic, and I was um, doing sessions with him because my first granddaughter was damaged at birth, and I was wondering how to help her without her mother, throwing me out again. And he said, I have never met anyone who uses their anger so creatively as
Hmm.
you. He said you could make a lot of money giving workshops on anger and how to use it. And then he said, but of course you'll be in a whole room of angry people. So I said, I don't think I want to do that. But yeah, I've never thought of it before, but my anger does sustain me.
Yeah, but the way you're putting it together in this context, especially in that vision, that moment of there, is it's really anger as a life force.
Yes.
And you know, so it's anger as a life force, and it's anger at, you know, at evil, and it's life versus death. You know, so we're not talking about angry. Yeah, so at least in that experience of it, the part of anger that sustains you is about, you know, maybe the I'm alive. I'd rather be alive than dead, and I'm fighting evil, or I'm not letting, you know, something feels very powerful from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would it be if for a moment we don't call it anger? You know, not that there's anything wrong with anger. I mean, I happen to really like anger as a very alive thing.
Mm.
But what you're talking about is there's an ambivalence between, on the one hand, you know, like in a way you say, I don't want to be in a room full of angry people. So for the purpose of this, you know, next few minutes, if we
I
just
might
call
like
it,
in a room of angry people. You never know. Might be
okay.
very stimulating.
But would it be any different if we called it life force?
Well, I think that's true. I think my life force is a good part of it is anger. I
Yeah.
think that's true. Maybe reverence of nature too. But yeah, um, and it carries me. It does carry me a lot. I could not erase two children on my own the way I did without any help if I didn't have that life force. And a lot of it was a lot stronger being anger than if it were, I don't know, something else. No.
Yeah. So for the moment, you know, just as you're talking about, you said I couldn't have raised two children if I didn't have that. So, in a way, maybe the anger at those moments is like the soldiers, you know, who ward off the attackers in order to make life possible.
Hmm. Yeah, but I didn't ward it. Uh, that's interesting. Would you say that again?
So, just you know, as you were talking about, I couldn't have raised two children without that life force. Then I'm starting to think of maybe the role of this anger is the life force, you know, materializing in the form of soldiers who are warding off the enemy in order to make life possible, you know, in order to make the raising of children possible. You know that, and then so when you're talking about, you know, the concentration camp and the pit, you know, the anger is again the soldier fighting back, pushing back against oppression, and um,
Yeah, the first time you said that, my reaction was, and then I didn't know how to put it in words. What I almost said was, yeah, but they keep the enemy away. What I did was pass it on to my children, but I didn't pass on the anger. But of course, there are the reactions to that. Strangely enough, my daughter, who is a writer, has written two books, two memoirs, and her second one has just come out. And she's traveling and doing book readings. And basically, they're both about me. The first one is called The Butcher and the Vegetarian, because I'm a vegetarian and I raised them as vegetarian, and how her whole thing about eating meat. And this one is about us trying to garden together and how different we are. I mean, she's trying to exercise me and my anger. Neither of my children are angry people.
mhm. So
It's anger they couldn't be, but still,
so
there's a
so
lot of
there is an aspect of the anger which is disturbing
yes,
because you're seeing it had consequences,
yeah,
and
absolutely,
so it's hard to make peace with it because there was a part that's very life affirming and it's very much about life force, and there is certainly at least a part that has had consequences that you wish were not or that you feel
yeah,
uncomfortable about.
yes, yes. And at the same time, I remember Joan Borsenko said something about giving up all that stuff finally when you get so old, you get to be a grandmother. And I wanted to say to her, but there were too many people around her. I wanted to say, you know what? I'm afraid to let go of it because that's what keeps me standing. And if I let go, and if I'm just this nice person, I'm probably going to go flop, and crumble. But that's true.
Yeah. But again with that scene of standing at the pit, the anger was what kept you standing. So letting go of that, it feels hard. I mean, it's really literally an image of life and death.
Yeah.
It would be hard to, but I understand the fear you're talking about is if I let go of the fear, then there's nothing left me standing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
In one way, that sounds like, hey, maybe I'll just be a nice old lady. But in another way, it's like, where's the rest?
Right.
Oh, huh. That's interesting. Well, so my anger sustains me, but I don't think I want to put that out to the world. Hmm. But
Well,
that's,
let me for a moment goes. It's like your anger sustains you, and your anger is also a source of um, I'm not sure what the word would be. Is it like trouble, second guessing, discomfort? But it's like there's both. Okay,
Mhm.
so in a way, for argument's sake, what's coming up for me is like anger is your koan in some way.
Oh, oh boy. That's interesting. Yeah, I would say that. I would say that. Huh. Oh, and do you know that's interesting because when I solved my first koan in the monastery, I was angry.
Hmm.
I did. I used that energy. I just gave up everything. I had tried so hard, so many things. That's really, really funny. And I went in there and I went, yeah. Hmm. Desperation would be another word for that. But yeah, anger is my koan. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Phew.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's an original face. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. Hmm. It's interesting because I was thinking, well, wait, so what's about this other part, nature? But I really do like what I called strong nature, strong weather. And you might say that's angry, the storms and everything,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, if I'm protected.
Mm-hmm.
But, hmm. Hi. So where do we go from here? So anger is my koan. Anger is my life force. Hmm.
And maybe also anger is your burden or your I'm not sure whether it's the right word, but is
Yeah, burden is a good one. Hmm. Baggage. Hmm.
baggage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So in a way, there's a lot to do with anger. That's like, and it's a complex relationship with what sustains you.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Hmm. I've got a lot of weeds here. I could use a bit more anger energy to get them out because they're really, really strong and hard. Mm, mm, uh.
So where are you inside with this? As we're staying with this anger, what's it feel like inside?
Mm. Well, before you said that, I was going to say, okay, Serge, where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm feeling inside is nothing really unusual. Like my stomach isn't tight. I'm still breathing. I'm a little cold because this is Seattle. Um, um, and part of my mind, a small part of my mind, is going, "Oy vey, what do we do with this?" um, Maybe I should have tried to be nicer. um, hmm. I'm quite calm with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Other than the thought of, let's not tell the whole world that I'm an angry person. But other than that, it's the truth, and it's quite frankly nice to tell someone else about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's not just my children knowing it.
Right, right. So to me, it feels like such a nice place of what we do with it is in a way pause with it, make room for it, digest it.
Mm.
That there's something about yeah, wow, there's so much about anger, and there's good stuff, and there's the difficult stuff, and there's the koan part, and so in a way, like uh, you know, what this does is simply is not rushing into doing anything other than simply making room for it.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I did a lot. I mean, anger gave me the fuel to accomplish a lot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I had 3 careers. I raised 2 children. I had a vegetable garden. I traveled and taught. All of that. I could not have done that with just everyday energy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because for me, the anger was definitely premium gas, premium fuel. Um, so it served, but where to go further with it is, I think it is a good place to pause because I don't have any answers.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But it feels nice because it's like you know the whole idea about the koan thing is about living with it.
Yeah.
And in a way, what you're saying is you have lived with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
it's had wonderful results in some way and some that you have more of a more problematic,
Mm-hmm.
but essentially it's about taking stock that in one way or another you have lived with it and not just necessarily in a one-sided way.
Mm-hmm. Right. And something that's happening right now is that I recently heard of a place here in Seattle that's what's it called? It's called the Holocaust Center for Humanity. And so I've decided I'm going to give them, at my age, you start thinking of where things go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give them my library on the
Mm-hmm.
Holocaust. And I actually was there a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to become a docent
Mm. Mm.
to help young people understand, or other people, not just young people, but going into schools and other things to help them understand. So that's a way. But in all of these books, some of the people are so angry from
Mm-hmm.
what happened to them, and others bury it. So
Mm-hmm.
angry. And others do things with it. It's very interesting how any energy can be used, but this specific anger energy is sort of like a special kind of fuel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm. Actually, it feels nice to have, like I said before, to talk to someone about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not only what sustains me, but it's how does this life force, this fuel sustain me? How
Mm-hmm.
do I use it
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
my life. And at different times, I've used it in different ways.
Yeah.
And now, coming towards the end of my life, how do I use it to get the most mileage out of it? Mm.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so what I'm thinking now is I can handle anger being my fuel, my life force. What
Mm-hmm.
I really need to make sure that I do is use it well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I manage very well to keep it out of any therapeutic work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. So there's a possibility of using it well.
yeah, yeah. Mhm. What was that play that I remember seeing in New York? Wasn't there an angry young man
I mean,
play?
certainly, angry young men is such a topic for
I think that,
movies and plays.
yeah, but there was a specific play that I'll have to
Yeah.
research it. See, yeah. Hmm. So
So maybe this is where we bookmark where we are,
yeah,
and to be revisited.
I appreciate this very much, Serge.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it feels really nice for me to be part of this.
Hmm. Well, you with your interviews, you must be a part of so many people's lives.